Hey, we're back with another episode of Before You Buy, that show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. As usual, it's me, Jake, and today we're talking about Hogwarts Legacy. This is the much hyped, much talked about, much argued about, big open world Harry Potter game that has been in the works for many, many years now. Remember back when it leaked? And then we didn't hear about it again for a long time? That was crazy. Anyway, usual spiel here. These are first impressions as we have gotten a review code, but we're able to get about 25 hours in and wanted to give you guys the heads up since people are already dropping cash on this. And this footage was captured on PlayStation 5 and is spoiler free. I'm happy to report that Hogwarts Legacy is a really solid open world action adventure game. I think the more jaded gamer will find some stuff that they've done a million times before in other games and maybe roll their eyes here and there, but I think Harry Potter fans that have been waiting for like the end-all be-all wizard game, I think this is pretty darn close. I think the developers that worked on this game took the Harry Potter franchise and ran with it, giving us new things and expansions way more exciting than even the more recent spin-off movies, in my opinion. Now, the game is a bit glitchy, but it's also charming and really fun. It distinctly feels like a Warner Brothers open world game, if that makes sense. Not like Gotham Knights. I didn't really like that game. Think more like Arkham Knight, Mad Max, or the Middle-earth Shadow games, but like way bigger in almost every sense. So where it starts, you're a fifth-year transfer student. It's a great jumping off point to kind of experience it as new through the character's eyes and also not be like a little baby kid. You're right in the middle. And you're under the tutelage here of a professor who was supposed to get you up to speed with other fifth years and get whisked up in a much bigger adventure that involves way more than just going to school and learning how to make potions or whatever. You create your own character, any type of person you want, total freedom, which is nice, but the face options feel a bit awkward and limited the way they're implemented. And keep in mind, like, total freedom, but like in the realm of realism, so you can't make a bug-eyed alien person or anything with sliders. It's not bad though, because there's a lot of loot, and that's where the custom character stuff really shines, like where you can really express yourself. One thing to note, you can choose your voice pitch. So for my character, since I know, I'll be honest, I have a bit of an annoying voice in real life, I decided to kind of up the pitch by 1 point, like the game lets you, and it resulted in a very tinny, modulated sounding voice. So be warned and be careful with the voice choices here, because your character does talk quite a bit. Now, you're thrust through a really cool intro, and then you slowly get into the flow of the game. Missions. Everything is a mission. Classes are kind of just side objectives or story missions that are part of the flow. So the game isn't broken into like a school thing every day. So if you weren't paying attention, I'm sorry if you were looking for like a Persona or Bully type school simulator. This isn't quite it. Still, you get the feel because class moments are interesting, the new professors are pretty decent, and the game actually establishes a roster of students, like a cast of characters that you get to know throughout the game. You hear about them, you learn about them, you meet them, you talk to them, you see them in the halls, you see them during cutscenes, and yeah. Now, within Hogwarts itself is where a lot of the game's mechanics are slowly introduced to you in a pretty digestible way. It's all trickled out. The main element, of course, though, is the spells, and I think there are about 16 to learn and unlock, and they have various uses between exploration and combat. So let's talk about combat. This was the thing I was the most worried about when the game was like announced and revealed and shown off. It was hard to tell how it really felt, or if it was fun, or if it made sense. I mean, as much sense as it can. It's magic fighting with sticks, but I'm happy that the combat is fairly decent and can sometimes be challenging. Tapping the trigger is like a strike button, like you're just doing jabs, basically hitting your opponents with a magic blast. It gets repetitive pretty quickly, unfortunately, but you're doing that really to manage things between cooldowns of your other spells that are mapped to the face buttons. This is where you can build combos. Say, soften them up with a couple of whacks, then use a spell to lift them up in the air, making them vulnerable for more damage, then hit them with a couple of more, and then use Accio or something to pull them in close, and then hit them with a close range blast of fire. Enemies also get more complicated and are more vulnerable to different things later on, depending on their shield or just their type, so you're going to want to swap out, say, ice spells for fire ones for certain dungeons, you know, that type of thing. There are 4 layers of face button spell layouts to swap through, and you can remap them. So I basically had 2 layouts for combat situations, and then the rest for random handy wizard tricks for exploration. It can be awkward sometimes, fumbling through lists of spells, especially in combat, that. But with the control scheme, I guess it's the reality of only having so many buttons. Also, you can unlock Flipendo for real. Real ones know what I'm talking about. But this stuff does work when you're shuffling through your spells, when you find yourself in a puzzle or something and you're like, what do I know? What do I know that can fix this? It's actually pretty satisfying. But back to combat, there is a bit more to it. You have magical items that you can use in combat, like buff potions and defense potions and a couple of killer plants you can toss around. And you can also dodge and eventually kind of magic dash. You can also deflect with a kind of magic shield parry that can then be wrapped into an additional stun, and then also throw random things in the environment at enemies. There's a decent amount of stuff. The aiming, targeting, lock-on type of thing for enemies isn't perfect. It'll mess up sometimes, but you at least have two different options to choose from with it. But that and the camera sometimes will screw you up. Still, having said that, overall the combat feels good. The effects are great, the sound and the general feedback is satisfying, but it gets a little repetitive here and there. The spells are doled out nicely throughout to shake it up enough. It's not the greatest combat ever, but it's not a failure or anything at all like that. I was worried, but it is fun. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, you have like a more powerful magic type that fills up with a meter and lets you do kind of like a devastating ultimate attack on enemies, and they have cool animations, but it also kind of makes you feel like almost too badass for this world. It's a bit tonally weird, but hey, it's a video game. I didn't mind it that much. Now, the open world outside Hogwarts is surprisingly big, and there are swamps, the dense, deep, forbidden forest, the big town of Hogsmeade, and various other smaller towns sprinkled throughout. There are a few kind of obligatory open world things to keep busy. Nothing too obnoxious, thankfully, and also tons of hidden puzzles and dungeons of varying sizes. A lot of this is for loot and progression. Yep, they managed to do another colored rarity loot system and put it in a Harry Potter game, but it works. Loot is pretty interesting. It has various effects, and there's a full transmog system to look however you want, regardless of loot, which is nice. There are a lot of different looks for your character, and the game gives you tons of shops and loot, and the gear slots in your inventory are limited, actually, and it's kind of annoying. Thankfully, there's Merlin puzzles to solve that increase your inventory capacity. You're going to want to grind them out pretty quick because the game gives you a ton of loot every mission. But additionally, in terms of RPG stuff, you're earning points every time you level up. So you can choose to spend those points to power up the effectiveness or radius of certain spells, how well your potions heal you or help you, unlock a faster dodge, stuff like that. Pretty straightforward skill tree stuff that works. It's decently paced. That stuff is useful and makes the game have some depth, but then there's some surface level stuff that doesn't matter as much and seems like it's just there for the experience. Or, for the cynical, maybe it's nostalgia bait. Like picking out your wand at Ollivander's and customizing it doesn't really seem to matter much other than cosmetic, and choosing your house just means your common room and outfits are different. I haven't really seen much else with that. And since the game is more of an adventure game than a school simulator, you're not exactly finishing the day hanging out in your cozy common room. It's just there for the experience and cash in one or two collectibles, and that's it, and it's fine. Now, I can be jaded, but where the nostalgia, the ambiance really works well is within Hogwarts itself. Like the castle school they built here, it's a massively impressive achievement. It's huge. And hours in, you're still discovering new whole wings and rooms. It's faithful, it's creative, and it's filled with hidden secrets, just like it should be. So from a gameplay perspective, it's good for exploring and collecting and side questing, but it's also just a nice experience, Candles float around in the Great Hall, ghosts hover by doing their thing, including Peeves. He shows up and messes with students and he sucks. Suits of armor will occasionally wiggle. Paintings are moving. Not all of them, but most of them. The grand staircase is staggering. Statues will talk to you. Students will pass by going to class, using spells to carry their books, sometimes pranking each other. Just all kinds of dynamic stuff that just happens for you to just see and enjoy. So if you were looking for the Hogwarts experience in a game, it's here, and I think it's still one of the best aspects of the game. They did a really good job. It's faithful and atmospheric and fascinating, and there's enough stuff to actually do in it, so it's not all set dressing. It's not all just filler. One big complaint for me, though, personally, is that although the students milling about are cool to look at, you can't really interact with them at all unless it's quests. I mean, like, NPCs are completely decorative, so you can't even really bump into them or do anything. I know the game doesn't want me blasting them with my wand or anything, but they don't really react to anything, and it's a bummer. At least the students you interact with on our quests are decent, and professors as well, but the NPC students don't add as much life as I would hope. Oh, and then the game has the room of requirement too. So it goes from like a little customizable place to craft potions and stuff to a massive, completely customizable room and a bigger outdoor area where you can catch and keep animals and creatures to keep them safe from poachers. It's like an in-game story thing. Most of this is somewhat optional, but it's fun to decorate a big spooky room with candlesticks and bookcases and chairs and paintings and stuff. The game really throws a lot at you here. Also, in terms of throwing things at you, as of right now, it is worth noting no microtransactions or really anywhere I can see them implementing something too offensive. We always here just love and appreciate when a game is straightforward, just a regular old game. One other issue that I mentioned at the start, I found the game pretty glitchy. If you're sensitive to that stuff, you might be annoyed here. To be clear though, I had nothing game breaking or like a bug that crashed my game or messed up a quest or anything. It's all just visual stuff, visual flaws. I've seen a few students T-pose or just completely disappear or reappear out of thin air and not in like a magical Harry Potter way. I've also had tons of atmospheric glitches where the game's fog or some sort of effect obscures too much of the screen or the scene and kind of kills the lighting. And also a weird, I don't know, HDR type glitch where dialogue scenes would flicker in and out of a brightness mode. I couldn't really replicate it on screen here, but it's kind of annoying. It's stuff that can be patched, but it's a bit iffy and it hurts the visuals a bit for a game that otherwise I think looks really gorgeous. The art direction for the open world is really good. Towns are cool, caves are spooky, and everything has tons of detail. The seasons change, and the entire world will reflect that season. That's pretty ambitious, pretty wild and impressive stuff, man. To go from walking around Hogwarts in a normal time of year to then it's switching to fall, and then there's pumpkins everywhere, it's a nice touch. Now, there is some graphical pop-in, for sure, but otherwise the game performs fairly well on PlayStation 5. The graphical modes, options do everything that you'd expect, and it's nice to have options to take advantage of higher refresh rate TVs as well. I really appreciated that. Now, keep in mind, this is the only version that we've been able to get our hands on. We don't know the state of the Xbox or the PC version yet. And as you probably remember, if you're playing on last-gen consoles, those releases are coming later. One other really good thing I'd like to point out is the music. It's excellent. From the ambient open world stuff to the bigger stuff. A lot of it is surprisingly memorable. And as someone who has been listening and obsessing to John Williams' music for like my entire life at this point, the composers here did a really good job of growing off of that in a way that doesn't feel like it's just ripping off or aping John Williams. It's celebrating. The music that plays during the first broom mission is nothing short of incredible. Overall, Hogwarts Legacy, I mean, it's a Harry Potter open world game with colored loot, RPG systems, side quests, and all that stuff we've seen before in games. But with the Harry Potter lore, the context, and some creative spins on things, and the new additions, it's all pretty compelling and fun. There's an interesting story here that actually seems to really flesh out the world in some interesting new ways without spoiling much. I think this is a great, refreshing way to get back into it, or introduce someone new to it. And that has left me feeling excited about a franchise I haven't really thought about that much in the last few years. Like I said, I think the developers took this and ran with it in a good way. I think that if you were looking forward to this game, you'll be satisfied, straight up. But folks, that's a before you buy. You know how this works by now. I give you some pros, some cons, and a bunch of personal opinion, and now I want to hear yours in the comments. Especially from the lore people. Are you a die-hard crazy Harry Potter fan? Do you know the ins and outs? What do you think about the stuff they're introducing in this game? Maybe if you're someone else, maybe you're a little older, you grew up on the stuff, but really kind of dropped off. Is this your way of jumping back into it? How do you feel about it so far? Everybody has a different take, a different perspective on this one, so let us know what you think in the comments. Be civil. We'll be down there as much as possible. But either way, hopefully this informed your purchase. If you enjoyed this video, clicking the like button helps us out. We would very much appreciate that. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
Lumos. Seems the devil's snare was protecting a chest of some kind. Incendiary. Lumos.